Yes, I can see there's going to be an awful lot of people running fast in the next couple of months as these big decisions are taken about spending billions of dollars in the next decade or so. Money spent by the Auckland Council, but also by the central government, and it's going to be a big national debate. So let's get cracking here with an excellent set of panellists who can dive into the fun policy detail of all of these implications of what we're talking about here. Starting with Patrick Reynolds, if Patrick could come to the stage, because I am a big reader of blog sites and a publisher of blog sites, and Transport Blog was a real pioneer in helping to broaden and deepen a debate in a particular place. And of course now it is the Greater Auckland website. Patrick is a photographer and an urbanist and heavily involved in fostering that debate. Patrick, thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. And it wouldn't be a panel without someone who's actually on the inside, who can see what's happening with all that planning and spending and operations. That's Cynthia Gillespie, who is the Chief Strategy and Development Officer at Auckland Transport. Cynthia, welcome to the stage. There are plenty of people with vested interests in the debate, but it's great to have someone who's independent, who's outside of the process, who's been there before, who has seen this money spent in various different places and can have some sort of background corporate knowledge about what's going on. And Peter Winder, who is the director of McGreedy, Winder and Co. Consultants. Please come to the stage, Peter, because I'm sure he'll be able to contribute to the debate in a really detailed way. Peter, thank you very much. And we also have Stephen Selwood, who is the Chief Executive of Infrastructure New Zealand. We heard the Mayor talk about the need to spend $11 to $12 billion on transport infrastructure over the next decade, and frankly, it should be a lot more. Stephen is in a great position to tell us about some of those needs around infrastructure development, and has some views on how that should be done. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and it's going to be better than the Parker fight. I'm sure it is. So I'd like to get things cracking with a discussion about this 10-year budget and the Auckland Plan for 2050. It's out there, the consultation document's there, you can all see it. But I wanted to ask Patrick first. You've had a look at this document. What do you think it should include?
Well, there are two documents, of course. The High Altitude Auckland Plan is a plan, and the other one is indeed a budget. I'm glad it's been called a budget. So they're quite different things. And a plan is a strategy document that should encapsulate values and vision. And as you go through the plan, I think most of us will agree that the words are fine, the aspirations are noble. But what I feel is critically lacking from it, and for it to be effective, is some actual numbers, some actual real aspirations, we're going to do this, even over a long time period. And if you look around the world, you can see that other cities do this really precisely. So my current favourite is the London Transport for London plan, which has really, really firm ambitions. Totally carbon neutral transport system by 2050. 0 deaths and injuries, serious injuries in the transport system by 2041. It has reduction targets for vehicle kilometres travelled, so complete reduction. A target is reducing the amount of driving that happens, because none of these aims can be met without people driving less. So before it gets into the particulars of what we're going to build, how we're going to offer a greater public transport system or better cycleways, it lists why it's doing it. So you can get buy-in especially from the bureaucracy. I think this is a really critical thing. Currently, I feel the Auckland Plan, and I do believe vision documents are really important. You've got to show value, you've got to show why you're doing something, but you've got to have real targets in it. Otherwise, the bureaucracy can just kind of drift. It doesn't have any impulse to achieve anything. We don't have, and when we come down to the budget level, we don't have an objective thing to measure it against. We don't have something to say, well, will this reduce the carbon emissions from the transport sector? Will this reduce deaths and injuries? And we heard before the Mayor say that congestion is calculated as costing Auckland between $1 and $2 billion a year economically. Well, death and injury is a similar figure. This should be, we shouldn't just talk about traffic congestion. Yeah, it's really frustrating when you're stuck in congestion, but it's quite annoying to be killed as well. and it's a disaster for wider families, and we've got an epidemic at the moment. We're on a complete rebound after a long period of improvements in that. At the moment, our road network is incredibly unsafe. And if we have a document that says safety is our priority and then we go on to prioritise vehicle speed, well, we're lying with the first statement. So we need these vision documents to be much more hard-headed than they are.
So to put you on the spot, Patrick, what should be those targets?
Well, they should be zero carbon emissions from the transport sector by, say, 2050. I mean, they need to be analysed really carefully. We have a situation at the moment where the morning peak into the city centre, we have a vehicle mode share of below 50%. 47% of people entering the city centre in the AM peak are driving their vehicles. Now, in 1994, that was 80%. We can continue that trend, but the best way to continue that trend is to have it as a real target. So let's say by 2025 we want that to be 20%. In the Auckland plan we've got things called projections, which say we might get to this thing, but they don't say we should try to get to this thing.
Because in London they have targeted that.
They have absolute targets, and the Mayor is on the block saying, I'm going to deliver this, and my policies will lead to this. So, I mean, some people think, oh, 30-year plans, it's all waffly, we can't tell anything. But if there are real targets that we have to be on our way to, then that makes the shorter-term plans measurable against them and can concentrate minds enormously, especially by the middle-level bureaucrats who have a tendency to just want to do what they've always done.
So let's say we did target those things, which seem pretty ambitious, going from 44% to 20% of, private vehicle movements going to the city. Peter, is the current, plan there, 11 to 12 billion of spending, is that enough to achieve anything like that?
No, it's not. Not even close. And I suppose for me, if I look back over the last 20 years, we spend an inordinate amount of effort trying to get the strategy right and having debates about whether it's motorways or public transport and other things. But all of that happens in the context where there has never been enough money to spend, and we still don't have enough money to spend. So to me, it's sort of like, don't worry too much about the strategy, follow the money and make sure that there's enough money to invest, and I'm sure we're capable of spending it wisely in a whole lot of things. The work that Stephen and I were involved in 2015 estimated at that stage that we needed to be spending about 400 million a year more than we currently are. Last year's estimate was about $600 million a year. Since 2015, construction costs have gone up. We've added a whole light rail system to the strategy and thinking about what we need to do. Where we're at now, great that the government said yes to a regional fuel tax, and I applaud the council for pursuing that, but it's still nowhere near sufficient to deal with the level of investment that is necessary both in building capital stuff and in operating the system.
So let's scare the heck out of an awful lot of ratepayers and taxpayers around the country and come up with an actual number that it could be. Because this budget talks about 11 to 12 billion. What do we really need to achieve the sorts of things that Patrick's talking about?
Well, as I said, it's in the order of another 600 million a year. And that's not a new number, that's been around for a long time. There'll be an argument as to whether you could do it for more or less, but it's going to be of that order no matter how you come at it. And yes, it's a scary number, but that to me is the elephant in the room. That's the thing that Auckland and the government actually have to grapple with, because the current funding tools simply won't take us there. And as I said, wonderful that there's a regional fuel tax on the table that wasn't several years ago, but it's still not at a level that's remotely close to where we need to be in terms of the total amount of revenue on the table.
So let's go there. Let's go to those funding tools. Stephen, what's your view on how we can bridge this funding gap?
Well, look, this is not really rocket science. There's only a few forms of funding. One is taxes, which is the one we're talking about today, and that's either property rates, tax increases. 2.5% seems very modest given our investment backlog. I would have thought that should have been going up by more than 2.5%, and I think Aucklanders should be supporting that. I mean, you've got to make a choice. Do you accept what you've currently got and just incrementally grind to a faster and faster halt, or do you actually invest in a better future? And that requires thinking about spending a bit more. The second option is user pays in some sort of shape or form. And we have to make a decision, I think, in Auckland, sooner rather than later, to shift to some sort of pricing regime on our road system. You know, if we put another 10 cent per litre on petrol, as is proposed, plus GST, once you take off the interim transport levy in place, then we're probably netting about another 100 million per annum. Well, there's 15% of the problem solved. What are we going to do about the other 5 to 7? And actually, I think the number is now much bigger than 600 million, because we knew when we did the ATAP analysis last year that was actually going to make things worse, even if we were investing in that pace. So the number is bigger than 600 million a year. The only thing that's going to move the needle anywhere near that would be something like a motorway congestion charge. And just to put that into context for you, there's 1 million cars a day join the Auckland motorway network on a daily basis, 1 million. Just imagine if they paid on average $2 for every trip. There's $2 million a day. Now there will be a bit of a demand management effect, obviously, because of the pricing. So you're not going to get a straight 365 days a year times 2 million, but you're going to get somewhere between 400 and 500 million revenue out of that. Now that sort of a charge is not a punitive charge. And if we were smart about how we levied that charge and made it variable so that people who got on the motorway at peak would pay a higher rate than those that got on the motorway off peak, then you could start to manage demand as well as raise a heck of a lot of money. And by that process, you will also encourage the sort of mode shift. People will make choices about when and how they travel. They would make decisions about what route they travel, and do they really have to be all on the road at the same time. And maybe employers might start to think about, actually, do I really have to run a 9 to 5 working day? Could I be more flexible with working hours? And it's all about getting the incentives right. And unless we make bold decisions around that, we're just going to keep on tinkering away at this problem, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. It's time now to be bold.
So wouldn't that, though, make it really difficult for poorer people living on the edges of town who have to go back and forth across town to maybe 2 or 3 jobs, dropping off kids? Wouldn't they really find it difficult to pay that $2, $3 to get onto the motorway, and wouldn't they just go around to the other smaller roads around it and block those up?
Well, here's the really interesting thing, right? So at the Southern Motorway, everyone knows the Mount Wellington crossover beside Sylvia Park, and the motorway narrows down 2 lanes at that point. At morning peak, 1,000 cars a day get through that point because the traffic is travelling so slow. We are using the motorway system at its most inefficient way. If traffic was able to travel at 60 kilometres an hour through that point, then you would actually get 3,000 cars. The road has capacity to put 3,000 cars at that speed. So if you were to charge a price that would balance the supply and demand so that cars could travel at 60 kilometres an hour, and not only cars could travel at 60 kilometres an hour, but so could public transport services, buses, express service buses in the same sort of corridor. So you're starting to provide viable options for people who may be not able to provide the $2 toll. But at the end of the day, those people will have choices because they can take the parallel route on the Southern Motorway, if they, on the Great South Road, if they so choose. Or maybe other forms of public transport or moving around the city might be possible because we will have the revenue stream to enable the debt to fund the public transport necessary. But if we keep on just sort of burying our head in the sand and say, oh gosh, it's going to have a cost impact, well, I'm sorry, we're not ever going to make the decisions that we need to actually address the problem.
So let's look in perhaps in a broader way at the amount of investment that's needed, and also the idea of using congestion charges. This is something a bit broader and maybe longer term than just a motorway charge. I wanted to bring Cynthia into the conversation here because Cynthia comes to us from Australia and has studied how congestion charging schemes and other places deal with these sorts of infrastructure challenges. And I wondered if you could tell us, what are the sorts of things they're doing elsewhere to try and deal with these issues, and could they be applicable here?
Thank you. Just before I start, I just want to take it back a step. The discussion that we're having now in Auckland is no different to any other city in the world. Everyone, if you gave me, and New York's a classic example, they've just appointed a new CEO into the Transport for New York system. He needs something like his estimated at $39 billion to make his transport system work. We can have this conversation for the next 30 years. In fact, the first document I picked up when I started in the job 6 months ago was a document written in 1965 that says you have to invest in public transport and you have to invest in infrastructure equally. Well, you've invested in infrastructure the whole way through and you've only just started investing in public transport. We've got to start to change the conversation. The conversation can't be, we need more money. There is no more money. It's not coming from anywhere. We have to change the way we're thinking as Auckland to move. And it is still about investment. We've still got to talk about how we're getting people the mode share changed onto public transport. And to make that effective, we've got to invest more in public transport. And that's just, that's part of the conversation. It's not all the conversation. The active transport piece that's been so effective around the city is a small component of it. The thing that I see is that we have continually to have conversations about we want to introduce a congestion levy, and yes, they do work and they have worked in other parts of the world for different reasons. Singapore's different to London experience, and US is a different story again. But the story that you continually see is we continue to manage transport systems as we have to have congestion management is the panacea to the congestion issue. The public transport is, it's not. We've got to start managing the transport system as a system, and it is a combination of a spend on all of those things. So we have to have, we've been given a $12 billion envelope. We now have to work out what is the best way to spend that. We will not fix congestion in a $12 million envelope. We won't. I won't fix congestion. You could give me $60 billion in the next 10 years. I won't fix congestion because you will always fill those roads. That's how it works in every city in the world. So we have to start the conversation about what will make people move to public transport. The mode shift for public transport at the moment, while we've got celebrated 20 million people moving on the public transport system, and it's hugely successful, and it is only 7 years old, what we've found is that the mode share is, over the last 10 years, is only about 1% of the population. So while the public transport has grown, so has the use of cars. That's the conversation we've got to have. Why do people want to use cars? Is public transport not effective? Is it not efficient? I saw an article today, and I don't know who wrote it in the paper, about how long it takes to get from West Lynn into the city. It took the cyclist 31 minutes, New Lynn, sorry, 31 minutes. It took the bus 57 minutes. It took to drive 56 minutes. People will not shift modes while it's slower to get on public transport than it is to drive. So that's the story that's where we've got to start to invest, is in not just building infrastructure for the sake of road infrastructure. It has to be about public transport focus. And Patrick talked rightly about the safety issue. That's an issue that it's emerging pretty quickly in Auckland as well. But that's where we have to have that discussion. How do we actually, as a community, work out what's effective for people to do that mode share? That's the discussion we need to have, and that's what we need to understand at Auckland Transport. What will help you get into a mindset where it's easier for you to get public transport than it is today?
And just one thing. Just one thing on the debates about public transport projects. we often have these big debates about the big honking project, you know, the CRL or the Waterview Tunnel. You talked about a system. Should we also be talking about the second tier projects?
So coming from a country where local government doesn't invest and doesn't have to pay for strategic assets, which I find alarming, you know, in terms of you people sitting in the audience have bought trains, you are paying for a tunnel. It's not done in Australia. It's simply not sustainable in the future for that to happen. Ratepayers can't pay it. The Mayor will never be able to cap and keep your rates at 2.5% if you continue to invest and have to pay for strategic assets. That's the first issue that I see, and we've got to have that conversation. It's a really difficult conversation with people from Wellington, but you know, that's the first issue. But
I quite like the Mayor's suggestion of asking for the $1 billion back.
well, I would be.
And Stephen Joyce is a bit quiet at the moment. Maybe he could come up with the checkbook. Yep.
But while we're focusing on those big projects, and everybody knows politicians love the big projects, you can cut a ribbon, and everybody loves them. It's the same the worldwide. I want to talk about, you know, I want to talk about the tunnel. I want to talk about the big roads. The thing that I'm seeing is, and the feedback that I'm getting from community and local boards is that we are missing that secondary level. So we're focusing on the big projects at the expense of what's actually happening on our roads, unsealed roads, unsafe roads, you know, and the public transport system. So we've got to step away from being attracted to these fantastically big, sexy projects. Am I allowed to use that term in public? Do you use it in New Zealand? So, you know, we've got to start thinking about that next level down and what it actually is delivering, what we as Auckland Transport are delivering for the community. So, you know, I think that's one of the things that I've noticed when I first got here is that we're not having that conversation about really what's happening on the local roads for the local people, you know. So that's, you know, that's part of the issue that I think is happening.
Cynthia's completely right. We have this very odd situation where we keep electing mayors who stand on a platform of providing strategic assets, but they don't control that decision. It's controlled down in that little fishing village at the bottom of the island. And
Hey, that's my home you're talking about.
They control, exactly. I mean, there is an imbalance, and it's not only the question that nearly 40% of the GDP is generated by the city, also 50% of the growth happens here. We do need to move to a situation, hopefully we have with the new government, that understands the value of Auckland and not just the cost. So we do need to get Auckland Transport and the Mayor out of big strategic assets and actually into providing the local stuff. But can I just say one thing about this enormous problem with, you know, we need infinite money. It's really important what you don't build as well as what you do build. And that last ATAP, which not only said we had to build all these gazillion things, including mini motorways parallel to motorways all over the shop, it also said, and you know, you referred to this, Stephen, earlier, that the modelling said it just gets worse. And part of that reason is we're still building last century's idea as we've moved to proposing to build this century's. Yes, we need to find more money and more creative sources of funding and spreading multi-generationally, but we've also got to stop building the bad shit.
Can I just jump in the back of that? Because yes, we need to stop building bad stuff, but I'll take you back to the comment the Mayor made at the outset. If we're adding a population the size of Tauranga every 3 years, then that means that everything that goes with the population of Tauranga needs to be added to Auckland, because
They can't all drive.
They can't all drive, but it's not just transport, you know. Hospital beds, schools, water supply, wastewater, the whole lot needs to be funded, and that's got to be delivered every 3 years by under the current growth rate. And I suppose, reflecting on the discussion today, there's been discussions on and off in Auckland since the mid-90s about some form of congestion charge to try and raise money and deal with this, and it hasn't happened. And the current work that's called the congestion questions on a timeline that mean by the Mayor's words recently, it's not within the next 3 to 4 years or any time soon after that, which to me says somewhere we need to come to grips with something that might be more achievable than that sort of approach to funding. Perhaps there's a different rationale or engagement with the government about the nature of its revenue sources, as the Mayor's indicated, that gets us into a different space. Because yes, we can focus on more sensible things to build, but my gut tells me at the end of the day, the bottom line will be there simply still won't be enough money within the current funding framework to do what is necessary.
There's also quite a bit of efficiency that can be achieved, and I think this is within Auckland Council's power. At the moment, the plan for how we grow Auckland enables significant growth, in fact massive growth to the north around Dairy Flat, Silverdale, a parallel sort of level of growth out to the west, and then slightly larger again down in the Papakura Drury area and north of Pukekohe. And then the plan is to also allow more urban density within the main existing built-up area. But the trouble with that level of intensification is that it's not high density intensification close to public transport, which is fundamental to really getting the sort of numbers that public transport starts to become a viable option for people. But we're subdividing sections in Pakuranga and Mount Roskill and Howick and out Henderson Way, and people are putting up another house on their existing section, typically not that well aligned to public transport. So wherever there's another house goes up, there's another 2 or 3 cars go in that location as well. And by that growth strategy, we're actually increasing the level of car density as much as we are as housing density. So if you think of a growth strategy now that enables growth northwest and south at the same time, thereby creating demand for movement between those 3 locations, or you're clogging up the middle with urban infill, and you wonder why traffic congestion is getting worse, it's just not rocket science. So what we could do is we need scale development, and Infrastructure New Zealand is advocating that we should promote a satellite city development, and our argument is to the south for a whole variety of reasons that I won't go into now. But effectively what it means is that you could do development around the main trunk line. You would have to put the 4th main line in to enable the capacity. But that sort of scale development is the sort of level of density that you require to really make rail work. And when you think about it, all of the key employment areas for Auckland are in and around the main trunk line to the south. So I'm not just talking 30,000 households down there, but actually building a city of the scale that would attract international investment, would achieve economies of scale, that would enable modular construction of homes that will bring down the cost of construction, and a design-led city that could enable walking, cycling, live, work, play, and all of those things that we want. So we've got a choice. We can either just keep on doing what we've always done, which is incremental growth everywhere, and trying to backfill the infrastructure after the event, always scrambling for money, and that's the Auckland story. Or we could change how we think about how Auckland grows, but inevitably we are going to need more money, and we're going to have to use our existing transport systems more effectively. So that's where the pricing component is fundamental to progress.
So that's one view of how it could go. What about this other view that I hear sometimes, that why are we building all these motorways and railways when we've got this new technology coming? We've got driverless cars, we've got ride sharing, we've got electric bikes. Hey, why spend all our money, our taxpayer money, our ratepayer money, dream up these new funding schemes when, Zuckerberg and Gates and co are going to solve our problems? Patrick.
Well, driverless car, however the car is driven or powered, it's still a car taking up space. And
Yeah, but
all of the evidence that we have currently from rideshare companies, Mr. Uber is here, I believe, is that they increase congestion in the city. So the idea is fanciful, that these technologies will decongest our streets by getting more people to take more journeys. Currently we have an average occupancy of private motor vehicles of 1.1, so there's 1.1 person per vehicle. Once we have vehicles that can drive themselves without people, we will drop the average occupancy of our vehicles below 1. We will send them home to get our homework we forgot. They will be running on errands, they're called zombie vehicles. So the point about AVs at the moment is that they're in a particular point in their development that they are sufficiently far enough away that people can fantasize endlessly about their value.
Cynthia.
Look, I support what Patrick's saying about driverless vehicles, but we've got an issue about congestion and mode share today. We can't have, we should be, there's no doubt we should be watching the future, because transport systems have to be a combination of a lot of stuff. And driverless cars, I'd love a driverless car because I hate driving. But, the deal is, he's right, as many cars as you put on that network, we've got to stop talking about cars. Let's start talking about different things. Let's start the conversation about, should we have driverless buses? They're out there. Las Vegas put theirs in, and they've got a fleet of 25. They crashed on Thursday. But they've got 25 out there. They're running them around. We've got to start talking about different ways to do technology that is here today. So, Australia's talking about on-demand. And on-demand services in Auckland, so at the moment we use a spoke and hub model to get people around in public transport. But the issue that I see is that we don't have enough, you can't get to the rail stations. It's really hard. Park and rides, you've got low numbers of park and rides. That's yesterday's technology. How do you, on demand is how you ring up and say, I want to move here at this time, and you want to take me to a train station, a bus station, or if you're in the city, around. And we need to start using that that's the future of mobility, for Auckland at the moment. That's the next generation that we're talking about. We should watch this stuff. We should be watching mobility as a service. We should be watching what the world's doing. Don't make the mistakes that world make with first generational technology. Most of you in your room should understand that. But there's things we have to do now, and the investment in public transport is about that next generation of public transport uplift that will change us having to use cars. As I said before, we need to understand what will make you use public transport and get out of your cars.
So what has actually worked overseas to get people to change their culture? Because remember,
have a good network. Have a real transport network. We've only got one joined up network at the moment, and that's the driving network.
It's really not rocket science. You need to be able to walk up and catch the public transport vehicle without having to think about the timetable, and it needs to take you where you want to go, and you need to not be able to walk too far at the other end and not get wet. I mean, none of these things are rocket science. We all understand what they are, but our network is still a long way away from that. Even 10-minute rail frequencies is not just the walk up and catch the next one sort of experience. So that's the direction we need to head in. We need to be realistic that we're not going to bridge the gap between where we are now and that sort of network in a hurry, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get there, but that's the sort of system we need to provide.
So are we talking the light rail proposal that's there at the moment, or more than that?
Yeah, more than
Well,
that.
whether it's light rail, advanced bus, whatever, the keys are travel time. Can you do it faster than the cycle? Is it reliability? Can you walk up without thinking about the timetable? Can you do it without getting wet? And is it reasonably affordable? Those are the things you've got to be able to deliver.
Can I just remind everyone in the room, though, that the issue is not just around commutes to and from home to work. Actually, the transport system is also about providing mobility for our entire economy. It's about business trips. It's about getting concrete to the house and building site. And it's about the commerce, the jobs, and everything that drives our society in Auckland. So whilst it's really important to keep a very strong, and I 100% support the focus on improving public transport services and increasing the urban density to enable that to occur, we also have to keep in mind that we're all going to those jobs, and those jobs are dependent on getting goods and services to all sorts of people across the city. Most businesses in Auckland, 96% of businesses in Auckland employ 20 or fewer people. That's a really important number.
But congestion is caused by private vehicles. So 77% of vehicles on the roads are private occupants, single occupant vehicles. So by solving you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you about the really important freight and delivery and tradie task. But they are being held up by all of us sitting in our cars. A reluctant granny or undergraduate who has to drive because there's not a good alternative is causing the congestion.
At the commuting. But look, I don't know how many
not commuting, all day. These are all-day journeys.
Well, yeah. But the primary demand period is during the commuting period, and that's the viable option that public transport can address. The trips, the business trips that are across the network today on a daily basis, I mean, there used to be a peak hour, or a peak 2 hours, which was kind of from 7 till 9. Well, on almost the entire southern motorway, particularly northbound on the southern motorway and southbound on the northern, that peak is now right across the whole day.
But
So, you know,
Yeah,
we've got to
it's a lack of
recognise
alternative.
we're driving the economy as well as getting people to and from work.
But those business travellers, the couriers and the concrete trucks and the vans, are they going to pay their fair share out of this? Because we've got this fuel tax coming up in which many businesses won't have to pay for it, will
Which
they?
is exactly why we should be pricing the roads, not using petrol taxes as the primary revenue stream. Of course they would pay their share if you had the right pricing mechanism in place, and it's appropriate that they do, and it should be factored into their business decision making about where they locate their businesses and all of those sorts of incentives. But petrol tax alone will hit the motorists, but it actually, unless it's on diesel, it won't make the contribution. And that becomes a very problematic issue. So, you know, you've got to get your revenue raising tools targeted at those who use the service.
So just to focus on that for a minute, because there's lots of talk about fuel taxes and motorway charges. There is an equity impact on poorer people here. How are you going to make sure that the people who can't really afford this stuff don't get pinged in the way that, you know, we have these tobacco taxes and all sorts of things?
Well,
which
there's
seem
two ways in Auckland. So Auckland is very specific. Many of the well-to-do communities are closer into the CBD. So you don't really want a distance-based charge, which is common in other jurisdictions, because if you have distance-based, then those who live in Manukau and Henderson, etc., will end up paying a lot more money. So you need an access charge, not a distance charge. So you could get on the motorway, and I'm using the Southern as the example, at Manukau for $3 in the morning. You can drive as far as you like for that $3. But if the person in Remuera who gets on, when they could have actually taken a bus, walked or cycled because they had much better options, they will have to pay the same sort of fee for a much shorter trip. And that's designed to incentivise their behaviour. But also, for those that are truly disadvantaged, then you have to find another way of supplementing their income. We do it with housing. There is no reason why we couldn't do it with transportation.
Peter.
Equity in terms of who pays is fundamentally important. And the work that the Consensus Building Group did in Auckland through 2013-14 spent quite a lot of time looking at that. You know, fuel taxes have potential to be quite regressive. Poor people tend to live at the edge of the city. They tend to travel to places where they don't have choices by public transport. They tend to work shifts or multiple jobs, which means that they drive a lot. Fuel taxes disproportionately hit them. Alternatively, businesses that use diesel aren't caught by a petrol tax. Excellent. Yep. Very great to hear. Perhaps I should pay more attention to the detail. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I'm a problem. White, middle-aged male. I drive. I enjoy driving, unlike Cynthia. My car is an extension of who I am and part of the perception of who I am. That's the generation I come from. Trying to get me to do something different will require a whole lot of effort. My children are completely different. They don't drive much. They catch public transport because that's how they've grown up. That's how they engage with the city. They have no expectation that they would drive to work and park a car. And I think in the core of that is a quite significant opportunity for us in terms of the way that we deliver services, think about them, engage with people, and also in terms of how we think about who the problems are in terms of the choices that they make and can afford to make.
But politically, they don't have a voice because they don't vote so much. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear we need to move to a form of road pricing because electric vehicles alone will render fuel excise redundant, and especially my neighbour with his Tesla, he'd be very happy he wouldn't notice any kind of charge. But how we design it is completely critical. The idea of simply charging the motorway system is fatally flawed. I mean, why did we build the motorways in the first place? To relieve the local roads. If we put a financial incentive for people to pour back onto Rat Run, the point of building Waterview will be lost every single car will be on Dominion Road. We know
you-
know very clearly that people will go a long way to avoid paying $2.
You don't understand the efficiency of demand management pricing that would actually increase the capacity of the motorway and actually allow more traffic to use it, because more vehicles can access that Mount Wellington corridor at 60 k's an hour.
Stephen,
price
your
than
little
they do
example
at the
was
moment.
very poor. If you get 3,000 more vehicles through there in the AM peak, they just get to the next roadblock quicker. You know the point. You know that's
No,
designed
because,
that bottleneck.
because other people will be
this is
making
fun.
other
This is
choices.
good. Ding, ding. And I'm curious too. I've taken an interest in behavioural economics in the last few years. They now win the Nobel Prizes. And this rational economics view that people will see a $2 to $3 charge and get out their spreadsheets and work it out, they just jump off?
I can tell you, Bernard, it is working today in the US where they have managed motorway lanes. They're
You know what they call them though, don't you, Stephen? They call them Lexus lanes, don't you?
well, maybe Kiwis are completely different. I don't know, but I suggest not. Look, it is happening right now where in numerous, in fact, tens of motorway managed lanes where people pay a variable toll. They guarantee a speed of 50 miles an hour. You pay the toll, you get the service, and people have the choice to go in a parallel free lane which is congested. So from that point of view, it is perfectly feasible, it is doable. We can talk about kind of long-term plans for congestion pricing, but Singapore haven't delivered their electronic GPS-based system yet. They're the leaders in the world, and their context is quite remarkably different from Auckland.
Cynthia.
I'm still concerned that in Auckland we're talking about, and it's progressive discussion, and we should have this discussion. Australia's not game to have this discussion. Politically it's unpalatable. But we're still having a discussion where we've got a transport system, London, 180 years old, Sydney, 130 years old, Auckland, your road network is 30, 50, I lost the years, 50 years old. Your public transport system is 7 years old. So we should be having these conversations about the options, but cars are a viable mode. Freight's got to be considered as it's your productivity of Auckland. You've got to have a combination of buses, active transport, rail. We've got to get the balance right. We've got $12 billion. What do we do with that $12 billion to get that balance right? And we haven't got all the answers.